now we're going to have a panel discussion looking at industrial biomanufacturing, a global view. We have some speakers from around the world, but to host this panel, I'm delighted to welcome Michael Carus, who's the founder and CEO of Nova Institute. So, Michael, are you in the room? If you'd like to come up to the stage, round of applause for Mike.
Sure.
Yeah, well, welcome to this to our panel discussion today, and I'm happy we have speakers from panelists from very different countries today. My name is Michael Carus. I'm founder and CEO of Nova Institute in Cologne, Germany, not so far from here. But the others are more far away, I think. I will start here. You are from Singapore. I hope I spell your name a little bit right. Huiling.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And we will learn more about synthetic biology. Sounds very exciting, so we will learn later more about it. Then we have Meaghan Seagrave from Canada. Welcome. And Gustavo Alvares from Brazil. I would like to start first. Biomanufacturing is a nice term, but to learn more about what is biomanufacturing in your country or in your company, which processes you are using and which application you are looking for. Yes.
So perhaps I can start first. So I'm Huiling, and I represent the Singapore Consortium for Synthetic Biology. So the consortium is actually a national-funded consortium to bring together industry and academia members to facilitate and foster collaboration for projects in synthetic biology, for greater adoption of technology, and also for use-inspired research. Now, for industrial biomanufacturing, how Singapore sees it is that it is a platform technology for green chemicals and materials. I think other than biopharma, that is it's relatively mature. Industrial biotech in producing green chemicals and materials is still at its phase where it's being developed. So some of the areas that Singapore is looking at for industrial biomanufacturing is in the area of chemicals and materials, where we hope not only the technology to produce these chemicals, but also bio-based ingredients. So some of the companies that have come to Singapore to set up base is like Arkema, where they use their sustainable castor oil to produce polyamide 11. This is an example of a company which produces biomanufacturing in that sense. So these two areas, in terms of the technology to produce it, as well as the feedstock that is from a bio-based origin.
Okay, but synthetic biology would normally mean to use genetic modified organism for production. This is part of the job, or do you also other processes, or is this your focus?
This is the focus because the consortium was actually born out of academia, where a lot of the development was by academic partners in genetically modifying organisms to produce fine chemicals, flavors and fragrances and things like that. So this is the base technology that we are talking about.
Are you also looking now for commodity markets?
Commodity markets, a little bit. There have been some partnerships that have been formed in Singapore that looks at bulk commodity, sometimes a bit like 1,3-PDO. These are some of the areas, partnerships that have been formed.
Yeah, thank you. Meaghan, how it looks in Canada with the focus of your work?
Thanks, Michael. So I'm Meaghan Seagrave. I run a national not-for-profit in Canada called Bioindustrial Innovation Canada. We've been around for about 20 years, and our focus is really green chemistry. We often get, I guess, categorized a little bit like an accelerator, but we're identifiers and validators of technology, and we've built a hybrid chemistry cluster in southern Ontario, which is essentially the middle of the country, for those of you who understand the geographic nature. We used to call it the Chemical Valley. It still gets referenced as the Chemical Valley because of all the older petroleum assets that were in play. And we use the stranded assets to create a hybrid chemistry cluster utilizing biomass feedstock, primary, secondary transformation. So our biomanufacturing in Canada, as much as we've got a little bit on the life sciences side that happens Quebec, East Coast and West Coast, most of Canada is really about agriculture, forestry, and even fisheries and marine biomass. We're a country that's almost the size of Russia, and we have less than 40 million people. But what we do have a lot of is agricultural residues from basic ag crops, forestry, feedstocks and residues, and marine feedstocks and residues. So primary and secondary transformation of all of those residuals into usually chemicals, some biomaterials and bioproducts. That's the biomanufacturing that exists within Canada. Yeah.
And from the processes, it seems so for me that you're also using chemical, thermochemical, and not only biotech processes. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a total mix, and it really depends on where the need is, who the potential off-taker is, and then the technologies coming into play. And we tend to work with the early stage technologies within our organization, and there's a lot coming out of our academic institutions, which we have a ton of. In Canada, and that R&D from an academic perspective is very well funded in our country, so that's where we tend to get those early stage technologies. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Gustavo, how it looks the world from the Brazilian view on biomanufacturing?
Well, thank you. Thank you the World Biomarkets team for inviting me as well, and I'm leading a venture building effort in Brazil for technologies on the industrial side, and I think I would love to include the World Bio in this name, because that's where I come from in a certain way. I've been with biofuels for quite some times. And when you look into Brazil, I would say the market has a very successful story on biofuels, right? And a very successful story on pulp and paper as well. And if you look into the impact that has had in the country from a social and economic perspective, it's very relevant. So I think on the bio side, that's a big driver of Brazilian technology development and research and regulation goes into those sectors. But there's a lot that Brazil has to look for, right? And the agricultural side is obviously a stronghold for Brazil, and a lot of the solutions that we see today, they are solutions for increasing efficiency on the agricultural ecosystem, I would say. Not only the yields, but also the ecosystem, the commercialization, the investments. And I think Brazil should pay more attention to its capacity to industrialize more, to create more value-added products. There's a lot of potential from a biomass perspective. There's a lot of potential from the energy matrix that we have. So that's where I'm looking for.
Is in Brazil also high-tech agriculture and topics, precision farming, drones, keeping the soil health, so a lot of things happening there. Is this also implemented in Brazil already?
Yes. I think if I'm not sure how many of you have been to Brazil, or if you actually venture into the countryside, you'd be extremely pleased and impressed with the type of technologies that are being developed there, not only by local companies, but also in collaboration with international companies that have been in Brazil for a long time. So the level of technical, the technical applications that are being developed in the country for improved efficiency in agriculture are impressive, and I think they're going to continue. But in my view, they shouldn't be the only focus the country should have. It should actually aim for applications that come from the biomass, right, and to produce materials, to produce other solutions. And there's plenty of opportunities on that space. Brazil is going to host and I'm sorry if I'm taking too long, but Brazil is going to host the COP 30 now in this year, and I think there's a lot of movement into what do we have to show, what the priorities are, how can we show the world that we are ready for leading with all the potential that we have. So, I see that as a potential mechanism for creating change. There's one thing that I heard recently, there's going to be probably launched before the COP, which is a roadmap of biomass and applications for that specific biomass in Brazil. There's a long research work that has been performed, and I think that's going to be pretty interesting. You know, I don't think most of the countries do that on an organized way. Brazil certainly didn't until now, and for the type of biodiversity we have, that's a good start.
Yeah, thank you, Gustavo. I probably will also join COP30 in Brazil, and there is this week a preparation meeting in Brussels. I will join.
Good.
Yeah. Before I come to my next bigger question, I have a question to you. We heard about biomass supply in Canada and Brazil is pretty clear. Where are you getting the biomass from? Singapore is a little small to give you the biomass, or?
Yeah, Singapore is small. There's no biomass. There's nowhere to grow anything. So a lot of what we get in Singapore is still petrochemical based. Singapore focuses on a lot of value-added manufacturing because it's a resource-constrained country. So it focuses its energy on those high-value things. So we work a lot with our partners in the region, Thailand, Indonesia. These are the places where we can get feedstock. Other areas where we look at would be in Singapore, there's a lot of research going on in food waste, valorization. So these are some alternative feedstocks that we look at. Yeah.
I'm not so sure that we can make it without a political market creation, because there is not a level playing field to the fossil solutions. Yeah? The fossils in the chemical industry, nobody pays any taxes on the fossil carbon, in contrast to fuels, and they're not paying the bill what the impact are on environment, for example, and they are big scale, and they have their plants over the last 50, 60 years. So I think it's really not easy to compete just because you are clever and have a good idea with the fossil system. But I'm looking forward to what you are saying to this driver and barrier situation in Canada, how you see it.
Yeah. We're in a unique situation in Canada now, especially with the new administration in the U.S., where 90% or more of our exports headed directly into the United States. So as that new administration's come in with their last 120 or so days, Canada has had to shift. So the actual driver has been, we need to better align with other markets, and we need to diversify our markets, which means alignment with the EU. Not to say that we were not aligned from a sustainability perspective, but when we didn't have an urgency because the US took everything that we could sell and more, and now Canada has put its elbows up and basically said, we're not doing this anymore. We're standing our ground. We need to sell to somebody else. So Europe as an opportunity becomes a driver for those markets, and most of the Canadian multinationals, or most of the multinationals in Canada, are actually European MNEs. We don't have a lot of Canadian MNEs within our own backyard, so a lot of those multinationals have very strict ESG standards that they need to adhere to or maintain, which means they are forcing their Canadian counterparts to do just that. So we have the biomass. Often Europe has the technologies. We have the ability to adopt to create that productivity and competitiveness within our own manufacturing sector by partnering with the EU, diversifying our markets, creating that technology adoption and acceleration. So
Meaghan, you have answered my next question, so you can really look to the future. That's good today. Now, but if you want to create markets outside Canada, I think normally it's a very good step to create also Canadian markets for your products. And that's both my question. And you look to the Chinese situation, for example, there also was many looking to export markets, but now they're creating also their own markets. I think that is a lesson we learned. Without domestic market, it's not easy to export to other markets. Is there also something happening in policy in Canada?
It's changing. We've got a new government that's come into play just of late, and that's changing, at least from a procurement perspective and a sustainability protocols within those procurements, those procurement arms. But the other piece to that is we're less than 40 million people. We are not really a market, but what we do have is we have long manufacturing value chains. So those become the market, and those become that market as well as the driving force. How do we defossilize those existing manufacturing value chains? That ends up being the market. Yeah.
Okay, and you also still have a good business with oil, so you have to do both.
Yeah, we do.
Well, in your case, Singapore is probably not the only market you're looking to. What is in your case the drivers? Are international companies, and can the government support your business better?
So in terms of Singapore, some of our barriers, I think, of course, Singapore is a very business-friendly place. We want to attract businesses to come. But of course, industry to market, there's always having that market demand is difficult. So I think how the government comes in to drive is, one of them is implementing carbon tax. I think policy is a very obvious way of leveling the playing field. So like, for example, in Singapore, the carbon tax, it was about $5 per ton, I think, of CO2 for the last 5 years. But in 2024, it increased to $25. And in the next few years, it's going to increase even more. So these are created drivers for industries to innovate. And that's where our government would then come in and say, okay, we implement this tax, but we also want to help you innovate. So they create that drive there for a greater technology adoption for people to reduce their carbon emissions or find way to maybe put it back into the value chain.
Right.
Yeah.
And also supporting your export of your technology?
Export of our technology.
Yeah, or should the technology stay in Singapore?
I think exporting the technology is definitely one way. I think currently we're not at the stage where we're talking about exporting. We're still developing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my next question was, and Meaghan already answered a little bit, is what you can offer to European companies. What kind of cooperation could you imagine between European companies and yours? I think you can just take the ball again.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Canada has signed on to Horizon Europe as of, I think, last September. So the opportunity to partner on those Horizon Europe projects is significant. It's still new for Canadian participants, whether it's industry or academia or research, but that's a massive opportunity to create those cross-pond partnerships. The other piece is Canada is we're good at funding research in our academic and research institutes. We have a multitude of them. For such a small population on a per capita basis, I don't think anybody in the world beats us. But that said, we're not good at funding those early stage pre-seed and seed capital opportunities, so we need to create partnerships to bring that venture capital in, and we've had that long-standing relationship with the US that it allowed us to do that for the last 50 plus years. What our government is wanted to do is they want to scale technologies. Well, we no longer have the pipeline for those, so we're looking outwardly at other regions like Europe to say, do you have the technologies that have already been validated and de-risked? Bring them into Canada and allow us to help scale them, because once the administration in the US is gone in the next 5-6 years, then we will return to that market, and it's a 300 million person market directly to the south with free trade agreements that I think will come back into play. Yeah.
To add also the question to the European Research Corporation, as far as I know, the part of the Canadian companies is paid by the Canadian government. That's right. So that means also if you have some Canadian partners on board, it's not an extra request for budget from Brussels, but you can perfectly join forces, scientific sources. I think this is a very important way for the next years. Gustavo, what do you think can Brazil offer to European companies or researchers?
I think the relationship between Brazil and European countries has been very strong, and I think will continue to be. When you look into the capabilities that Brazil offers today, and not only obviously the type of energy we produce and the size of the market we have internally, which is already an opportunity, but I have been, collaborating with some of the local institutes on technology development that have been created in Brazil. One of the largest ones being the SENAI, which is a privately funded institute that develops very interesting technology and research for global companies and local companies in Brazil, and also developing new technologies they want to push into the market. And these facilities today, they offer I would say very good, if not excellent, piloting lab and demo, in some cases demo infrastructure for fermentation and chemical processes as well. So I think Brazil is a place that should be in the scenario of any large company when exploring also opportunities, right? The amount of different biomass sources you can find there, it's large, and I think we know very little about it yet. So that's where I think a lot of the research should be, and hopefully, with a law that was enacted a few years ago, this is the start to actually putting some regulation in place for local and international companies to explore it.
Yeah, I'm also impressed that some Brazilian companies are offering alternatives to cracker chemistry, making ethylene from ethanol, not only in Brazil, also now in other countries in Asia. This is also interesting development on the big chemical industry. Singapore. How we can cooperate with you?
So I think in Singapore, our government, a bit like what Meaghan talked about in Canada, I think in Singapore there's also been a lot of funding that is poured into developing upstream capabilities in the academic institutions, and there's a lot that can be tapped on in terms of the academic expertise. I think taking a bigger view, Singapore is very neutral ground. Singapore doesn't have much of a market, but it's a neutral ground, very business friendly. And a lot of times when I speak to companies, they are always interested in how Singapore can be a gateway to China and other Asian companies, Asian regions. So I think this is quite special of Singapore, where we are strategically located, and also we have the upstream development. Singapore government is also pouring in money to build downstream capabilities to be able to scale to a certain level, to bring technology to pre-pilot and pilot scale. So I think these are some of the areas why Singapore is in a strategic location to regional and also China.
You have mentioned China, Thailand, Indonesia. But when I'm right, you are also very close to Malaysia.
Yeah, our neighbor.
And Malaysia is also kind of a lot of technology and a lot of feedstock.
Yes.
Interesting biomass feedstock.
Exactly. Yeah.
So a lot of opportunities.
Yes.
If the clock is right, then the time is over. It's right. Okay. Then many thanks to the all panelists for the insights in your countries, and I hope we can have additional discussions after the break.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very much.